The sky above the desolate planet of Krylos was a swirling mix of deep purples and oranges, a testament to the unique atmospheric composition that made it both beautiful and deadly. The air was thick with the scent of sulfur, and the ground was a cracked, barren wasteland. It was a place where few dared to tread, and even fewer survived. But for Captain Elias Voss, it was just another day on the job. Elias was a seasoned explorer, a man who had seen more of the galaxy than most could ever dream of. His ship, the Starblade, was a sleek, state-of-the-art vessel equipped with the latest in technology and weaponry. He had been sent to Krylos on a routine reconnaissance mission, tasked with gathering data on the planet's unstable core. But as he stepped out of his ship, clad in his armored suit, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The ground beneath his feet was hot, even through the thick soles of his boots. The air was heavy, and the silence was deafening. There were no signs of life, no movement, no sound. It was as if the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Elias activated his helmet scanner, the HUD displaying a map of the surrounding area. There was a faint energy signature about 2 clicks to the east, just beyond a ridge of jagged rocks. He adjusted his grip on his plasma rifle and began to make his way towards it. As he approached the ridge, the energy signature grew stronger. He could feel it now, a low hum that resonated in his bones. He crouched low, using the rocks for cover as he peered over the edge. What he saw made his blood run cold. There, in the middle of a shallow crater, was a figure. It was humanoid, but unlike any human Elias had ever seen. The being was tall, easily over 7 feet, with a muscular build that spoke of immense strength. Their skin was a deep, metallic blue, and their armor was unlike anything Elias had ever encountered. It was sleek and organic, as if it had grown from the being's body. The figure was kneeling, their head bowed, and their breathing was labored. Elias hesitated. He had no idea what this being was, or what they were capable of. But as he watched, the figure slumped forward, collapsing onto the ground. They were injured, possibly dying. Elias's instincts kicked in, and before he could second-guess himself, he was moving. He approached cautiously, his rifle at the ready. As he got closer, he could see the extent of the being's injuries. Their armor was cracked and scorched, and there were deep gashes along their side. Their breathing was shallow, and their eyes were closed. Elias knelt beside them, his scanner confirming that they were alive, but barely. "Hey," he said softly, unsure if the being could even understand him. "Can you hear me?" The being's eyes flickered open, and Elias found himself staring into a pair of glowing, golden orbs. There was intelligence there, and something else, something ancient and powerful. The being's lips moved, and a voice, deep and resonant, filled Elias's mind. "Help me." Elias blinked, startled. The being hadn't spoken aloud, the words had been projected directly into his mind. He shook off his surprise and nodded. "I'll do what I can." He quickly assessed the situation. The being was too large for him to carry back to his ship alone, and he didn't have the equipment to treat their injuries here. He would need to stabilize them and then figure out a way to get them back to the Starblade. Elias opened a compartment on his belt and pulled out a medkit. He worked quickly, applying a coagulant to the worst of the wounds and injecting the being with a stimulant to keep them conscious. As he worked, he couldn't help but notice the intricate designs on the being's armor. They were unlike anything he had ever seen, a mix of organic and mechanical elements that seemed to pulse with energy. "Who are you?" he asked as he worked. "What happened to you?" The being's eyes met his, and once again, their voice filled his mind. "I am Kael'thar, warrior of the Zewanrak. I was betrayed. Left for dead." Elias frowned. "Betrayed? By who?" Kael'thar's expression darkened, and for a moment, Elias thought he saw a flicker of anger in those golden eyes. "My own kind. They fear what I have become." What I represent. Elias didn't have time to press further. The ground beneath them began to tremble, and a low rumble filled the air. He looked up, his scanner picking up multiple energy signatures approaching fast. "We need to move," he said, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Can you walk?" Kildar nodded, though it was clear that every movement caused them pain. Elias helped them to their feet, supporting their weight as they began to make their way back to the Starblade. The tremors grew stronger, and the air was filled with the sound of distant explosions. As they reached the ship, Elias quickly activated the ramp and helped Kildar inside. He strapped them into a seat and rushed to the cockpit, firing up the engines. The Starblade lifted off just as a group of figures emerged from the horizon, their weapons blazing. Elias didn't wait to see who they were. He punched the throttle, and the Starblade shot into the sky, leaving the planet's surface far behind. As they broke through the atmosphere, he let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. He turned to look at Kildar, who was slumped in their seat, their breathing still labored. "You're safe now," he said. "We'll get you patched up." Kildar's eyes met his, and for the first time, Elias thought he saw a flicker of gratitude in those golden orbs. "Thank you," the warrior's voice echoed in his mind. "But this is only the beginning." Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" Kildar didn't respond. Their eyes closed, and they slipped into unconsciousness, leaving Elias with more questions than answers. The Starblade hurtled through the void of space, its engines humming steadily as it carried its two passengers away from the dangers of Krylos. Captain Elias Vost sat in the cockpit, his hands resting lightly on the controls as he monitored the ship's systems. His mind, however, was far from the task at hand. He couldn't stop thinking about the being he had rescued, Kildar, the Ziwanrak warrior. Elias had managed to stabilize Kildar's injuries using the ship's medical bay, but the warrior was still unconscious. The wounds were severe, and Elias had no idea how long it would take for them to heal. He had also taken the opportunity to examine Kildar's armor more closely. The material was unlike anything he had ever seen, a perfect fusion of organic and synthetic components that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It was both fascinating and unsettling. As the hours passed, Elias found himself growing more and more curious about Kildar's story. Who were the Ziwanrak? Why had they betrayed one of their own? And what did Kildar mean when they said that this was only the beginning? Elias was pulled from his thoughts by a soft chime from the ship's console. He glanced at the display and saw that they were approaching a nearby star system. He had set a course for a small, out-of-the-way space station where he could refuel and gather supplies. It was also a place where he could lay low for a while, away from prying eyes. As the Starblade entered the star system, Elias activated the autopilot and made his way to the medical bay. Kildar was still unconscious, their massive frame taking up most of the space in the small room. Elias checked the monitors, confirming that the warrior's vitals were stable. He then sat down in a nearby chair, watching Kildar's chest rise and fall with each breath. "Who are you?" Elias muttered under his breath. "And what kind of trouble have I gotten myself into?" As if in response, Kildar's eyes flickered open. They turned their heads slowly, their golden eyes locking onto Elias's. "You saved me," Kildar's voice echoed in Elias's mind. "Why?" Elias was taken aback by the question. I couldn't just leave you there to die," he said after a moment. "It's not in my nature." Kildar studied him for a long moment, their gaze intense and penetrating. "You are different from the others of your kind," they said finally. "Most would have left me to my fate." Elias shrugged. "I guess I'm not most people." Kildar's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Perhaps that is why the fates brought us together." Elias leaned forward, his curiosity getting the better of him. "What happened to you, Kildar? Who betrayed you?" Kildar's expression darkened, and they looked away. "It is a long story," they said. One that I am not sure you are ready to hear. Elias frowned. Try me. Kaeldar was silent for a moment, as if weighing their words. Finally, they turned back to Elias, their golden eyes glowing with intensity. The Ziwenrak are a warrior race, they began. We have existed for millennia, honing our skills in battle and striving for perfection in all things. But our society is rigid. There is no room for deviation, no tolerance for those who do not conform to the will of the elders. Elias nodded, encouraging Kaeldar to continue. I was once a loyal warrior, devoted to the cause of the Ziwenrak, Kaeldar said. But over time, I began to question the path we were on. I saw the destruction we caused, the lives we took in the name of our so-called glory. I could not reconcile this with the ideals I had been taught. Elias could hear the pain in Kaeldar's voice, even though it was only in his mind. What did you do? He asked. I spoke out, Kaeldar said. I challenged the elders, questioned their decisions. For this, I was branded a traitor. They stripped me of my rank, cast me out, and left me to die on Krylos. Elias felt a surge of anger at the injustice of it all. That's insane, he said. You were just trying to do the right thing. Kaeldar's eyes met his, and for the first time, Elias saw a flicker of hope in those golden orbs. You understand, Kaeldar said. That is rare among your kind. Elias shook his head. I don't know about that. I just believe in doing what's right, no matter the cost. Kaeldar nodded slowly. That is a noble belief. But it is also a dangerous one. Elias frowned. What do you mean? Kaeldar's expression grew serious. The Ziwenrak will not stop until I am dead. They will hunt me across the galaxy, and they will not hesitate to destroy anyone who stands in their way. By saving me, you have made yourself a target. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. He had known that rescuing Kaeldar would come with risks, but he hadn't fully considered the consequences. Still, he couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. I made my choice, he said firmly. And I'll stand by it. Kaeldar studied him for a long moment, their gaze unwavering. You are brave, Captain Voss. Braver than most. But bravery alone will not be enough to protect you from what is to come. Elias leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. What are you saying? That we're in danger? Kaeldar nodded. The Ziwenrak are relentless. They will stop at nothing to achieve their goals. And now that they know you are with me, they will come for you as well. Elias took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. All right. So what do we do? Kaeldar's eyes gleamed with determination. We fight. We stand together, and we show them that we will not be cowed by their threats. Elias felt a surge of adrenaline at Kaeldar's words. He had always been a man of action, and the thought of facing off against an entire warrior race was both terrifying and exhilarating. All right, he said, standing up. Let's do this. But first, we need a plan. Kaeldar nodded. Agreed. But there is something you must know before we proceed. Elias raised an eyebrow. What's that? Kaeldar's expression grew solemn. The Ziwenrak are not the only threat we face. There is a greater danger, one that even they fear. And it is coming. Elias felt a knot of dread form in his stomach. What kind of danger? Kaeldar's eyes burned with intensity as they spoke. An ancient evil, one that has lain dormant for millennia. But now, it stirs. And if it awakens, it will consume everything in its path. Elias stared at Kaeldar, his mind reeling. You're talking about some kind of ancient weapon? A monster? Kaeldar shook their head. Worse. It is a force of nature, a being of pure destruction. And it is tied to the fate of the Ziwenrak in ways that even we do not fully understand. Elias felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. And you think it's coming back? Kael'thar's gaze was unwavering. I know it is. And when it does, the galaxy will burn. Elias took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. All right. So we have a warrior race hunting us, and an ancient evil on the horizon. Anything else? Kael'thar's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. Is that not enough? Elias couldn't help but laugh, despite the gravity of the situation. I guess it is. So, what's the plan? Kael'thar's expression grew serious once more. We must gather allies. Those who are willing to stand against the coming storm. And we must prepare for the battle that lies ahead. Elias nodded, feeling a sense of determination settle over him. All right. Let's get to work. As the Starblade continued its journey through the stars, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something monumental. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and he and Kael'thar were at the center of it all. But as he looked at the Ziwanrak warrior, he felt a surge of confidence. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way. And they would fight, not just for their own survival, but for the future of all.
The Starblade emerged from hyperspace on the outskirts of the Andarian system, a bustling hub of trade and commerce located at the crossroads of several major space lanes. It was a place where beings from all corners of the galaxy came to do business, and where information flowed as freely as the credits that changed hands. For Elias and Kael'thar, it was the perfect place to begin their search for allies. As the ship approached the space station that served as the system's central hub, Elias couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The station was a massive, sprawling structure, its surface covered in a patchwork of docking bays, communication arrays, and habitation modules. It was a place where anything could happen, and where danger lurked around every corner. Elias guided the Starblade into an empty docking bay, the ship's landing gear extending with a soft hiss as it touched down on the station's surface. He powered down the engines and turned to Kael'thar, who was seated in the co-pilot's chair. All right, he said, we need to be careful here. This place is crawling with all sorts of unsavory characters. We don't want to draw too much attention to ourselves. Kael'thar nodded, their golden eyes scanning the station through the cockpit's viewport. Understood. But we cannot afford to waste time. The Ziwanrak will not be far behind. Elias sighed. I know. But we need to play this smart. We'll start by gathering information, see if we can find anyone who's willing to help us. Kael'thar's expression was unreadable, but Elias could sense their impatience. Very well. But we must move quickly. Elias grabbed his sidearm and secured it in its holster, then activated the ship's security systems. Let's go. The two of them made their way down the Starblade's ramp and onto the station's bustling promenade. The air was thick with the sounds of conversation, the hum of machinery, and the occasional burst of music from a nearby cantina. Beings of all shapes and sizes moved through the crowd, their faces obscured by hoods, helmets, and masks. Elias kept his hand close to his sidearm as they walked, his eyes scanning the crowd for any signs of trouble. Kael'thar, meanwhile, moved with a quiet confidence, their towering frame drawing more than a few curious glances. They made their way to a small, dimly lit cantina tucked away in a corner of the station. It was the kind of place where deals were made in the shadows, and where information was traded as freely as drinks. Elias pushed open the door and stepped inside, Kael'thar close behind. The cantina was filled with a mix of species, all of them engaged in hushed conversations. The air was thick with the scent of alcohol and the faint tang of ozone from the station's life support systems. Elias made his way to the bar, where a grizzled-looking human bartender was wiping down a glass. "What'll it be?" the bartender asked, his voice gruff. "Information," Elias said, sliding a credit chip across the bar. "We're looking for someone who knows about the Ziwanrak." The bartender's eyes narrowed, and he glanced at Kael'thar before picking up the credit chip. "You're playing a dangerous game, friend," he said. "The Ziwanrak aren't the kind of folks you want to mess with." Elias leaned in closer, lowering his voice. We're not looking to mess with them. We're looking for someone who can help us. The bartender studied him for a moment, then nodded towards a corner of the cantina. See that guy over there? The one with the scar? He might be able to help you. But be careful, he's not exactly the friendly type. Elias followed the bartender's gaze to a figure seated alone at a table. The man was human, with a jagged scar running down the side of his face. He was dressed in a worn leather jacket, and a blaster was strapped to his thigh. His eyes were sharp, and they flicked up to meet Elias's as he approached. Mind if we join you? Elias asked, gesturing to the empty chairs. The man shrugged. Suit yourself. Elias and Kaldar sat down, and Elias leaned forward, keeping his voice low. We're looking for information on the ZYN rack. We were told you might be able to help. The man's eyes narrowed, and he glanced at Kaldar before returning his gaze to Elias. What's your interest in the ZYN rack? Elias hesitated, then decided to take a chance. We're trying to stop them. They're after us, and we need to find a way to fight back. The man studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right. I'll tell you what I know. But it's gonna cost you. Elias slid another credit chip across the table. Name your price. The man picked up the chip and pocketed it, then leaned back in his chair. The ZYN rack are a warrior race, like you probably already know. But what you might not know is that they're not just after you because you've got one of their own with you. Elias frowned. What do you mean? The man's expression grew serious. There's a prophecy among the ZYN rack. It speaks of a time when an ancient evil will return, and only a chosen few will be able to stop it. They believe that Kaldar here is one of those chosen few. Elias glanced at Kaldar, who remained silent, their golden eyes fixed on the man. The ZYN rack see Kaldar as a threat, the man continued. They believe that if they can eliminate them, they can prevent the prophecy from coming true. But they're wrong. The prophecy is already in motion, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of ancient evil are we talking about? The man leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. It's called the Voidborn. An entity of pure destruction, older than the galaxy itself. It was imprisoned millennia ago, but the seals that bind it are weakening. And when it breaks free, it will consume everything in its path. Elias's mind raced as he processed the man's words. And you think Kaldar is the key to stopping it? The man nodded. According to the prophecy, yes. But it won't be easy. The ZYN rack will stop at nothing to prevent it, and there are others who will try to use the Voidborn for their own gain. Elias took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. All right. So what do we do? The man leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. You need to find the other chosen ones. They're scattered across the galaxy, each with their own role to play in the coming battle. But be warned, the ZYN rack will be hunting them too. Elias nodded, feeling a sense of determination settle over him. All right. We'll find them. But we're going to need help. The man studied him for a moment, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a small data chip. This contains the coordinates of a safe house. There's someone there who can help you. But be careful, trust no one. Elias took the data chip and pocketed it, then stood up. Thanks. We'll be in touch. The man nodded, his expression unreadable. Good luck. You're gonna need it. As Elias and Kaldar made their way out of the cantina, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far bigger than they had anticipated. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and they were at the center of it all. But as he looked at Kaldar, he felt a surge of confidence. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way. And they would fight, not just for their own survival, but for the future of all.
The Starblade hurtled through hyperspace, the stars outside the viewport blurring into streaks of light as the ship made its way to the coordinates provided by the scarred man in the cantina. Elias sat in the cockpit, his hands resting lightly on the controls as he monitored the ship's systems. His mind, however, was far from the task at hand. He couldn't stop thinking about the prophecy, the Voidborn, and the other chosen ones they were supposed to find. Kildar sat in the co-pilot's seat, their golden eyes fixed on the swirling vortex of hyperspace. They had been silent since their encounter in the cantina, and Elias could sense the weight of their thoughts. "Are you all right?" Elias asked, breaking the silence. Kildar turned to look at him, their expression unreadable. "I am troubled," they said finally. "The prophecy is not something I ever wished to be a part of. And yet, here we are." Elias nodded, understanding the burden that Kildar carried. "I get it. But if what that guy said is true, then we don't have a choice. We have to find the others and stop the Voidborn before it's too late." Kildar's gaze returned to the viewport. "I know. But the path ahead is fraught with danger. The Zwanrak will not stop until they have eliminated us, and the Voidborn's influence is already spreading. We must be cautious." Elias sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, no kidding. But we can't do this alone. We need allies, people who can help us." Kildar nodded. "Agreed. But we must choose our allies carefully. Not all who offer their aid can be trusted." Elias couldn't argue with that. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and there were plenty of people who would gladly sell them out for the right price. But they didn't have the luxury of being picky. They needed all the help they could get. The Starblade dropped out of hyperspace on the edge of a remote star system, the coordinates leading them to a small, rocky planet orbiting a dim red star. The planet was uninhabited, its surface covered in jagged mountains and deep canyons. According to the data chip, the safe house was located in one of those canyons, hidden from prying eyes. Elias guided the ship down through the planet's thin atmosphere, the Starblade sensors scanning the surface for any signs of life. As they approached the coordinates, a small structure came into view, a squat, bunker-like building nestled in the shadow of a towering cliff. "That's it," Elias said, bringing the ship in for a landing. "Let's hope whoever's in there is friendly." The Starblade touched down on a rocky plateau near the bunker, and Elias powered down the engines. He grabbed his sidearm and secured it in its holster, then turned to Kildar. "Ready?" he asked. Kildar nodded, their expression grim. "Let us proceed." The two of them made their way down the ship's ramp and onto the planet's surface. The air was thin and cold, and the ground was covered in a fine layer of dust. The bunker was a short walk away, its metal walls pitted and scarred from years of exposure to the elements. As they approached the entrance, Elias noticed a small control panel set into the wall. He pressed a button, and after a moment, the heavy metal door slid open with a groan. Inside, the bunker was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of oil and machinery. The walls were lined with shelves filled with tools and spare parts, and in the center of the room was a large workbench covered in half-finished projects. "Hello?" Elias called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. "Anyone here?" There was a moment of silence, then a voice called out from the shadows. "Who's asking?" Elias turned towards the sound, his hand hovering near his sidearm. "My name's Elias Voss. We were told we could find help here." There was a soft chuckle, and a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was a woman, tall and lean, with sharp features and piercing green eyes. She was dressed in a worn jumpsuit, her hands stained with grease. A pair of goggles rested on her forehead, and a blaster was strapped to her thigh. "Help, huh?" she said, crossing her arms over her chest. "Depends on what kind of help you're looking for." Elias glanced at Kildar, then back at the woman. "We're looking for someone who can help us stop the Voidborn." The woman's expression darkened, and she took a step closer. "The Voidborn, you say? That's a name I haven't heard in a long time." Elias nodded. We were told that there are others like Kaldar here, chosen ones who can help us stop it. The woman studied them for a long moment, her gaze flicking between Elias and Kaldar. Finally, she nodded. All right. I'll help you. But you're not going to like what you find. Elias frowned. What do you mean? The woman turned and walked over to the workbench, picking up a small device and tossing it to Elias. That's a tracking beacon. It'll lead you to the others. But be warned, they're not exactly the friendly type. Elias caught the beacon and examined it. Thanks. But why are you helping us? The woman's expression softened, and for a moment, Elias thought he saw a flicker of sadness in her eyes. Because I've seen what the Voidborn can do. And if there's even a chance that you can stop it, then I have to help. Elias nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude towards the woman. Thank you. We won't let you down. The woman gave him a small smile. You'd better not. Now get going. You've got a galaxy to save. Elias and Kaldar made their way back to the Starblade, the tracking beacon in hand. As they boarded the ship and prepared for takeoff, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far bigger than they had anticipated. But as he looked at Kaldar, he felt a surge of confidence. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way. And they would fight, not just for their own survival, but for the future of all. The Starblade emerged from hyperspace on the edge of a star system that was unlike anything Elias had ever seen. The system was dominated by a massive black hole, its event horizon a swirling maelstrom of darkness that seemed to devour the very light around it. The tracking beacon had led them here, to the final destination of their journey. Elias sat in the cockpit, his hands gripping the controls tightly as he guided the ship through the system. The black hole's gravitational pull was immense, and he had to constantly adjust the ship's course to avoid being pulled in. This is it, he said, his voice tense. The beacon's leading us to a small moon orbiting the black hole. That's where we'll find the others. Kaldar, seated in the co-pilot's chair, nodded silently. Their golden eyes were fixed on the black hole, their expression unreadable. As they approached the moon, Elias could see that it was a barren, rocky world, its surface scarred by countless impacts. The tracking beacon indicated that the others were located in a deep crater near the moon's equator. Elias brought the Starblade in for a landing, the ship's thrusters kicking up a cloud of dust as it touched down on the moon's surface. He powered down the engines and turned to Kaldar. All right, he said, his voice steady. This is it. We find the others, and we stop the Voidborn. Kaldar nodded, their expression grim. Let us proceed. The two of them made their way down the ship's ramp and onto the moon's surface. The air was thin and cold, and the ground was covered in a fine layer of dust. The crater was a short walk away, its walls towering above them like the jaws of some great beast. As they approached the crater, Elias noticed a faint glow coming from within. He activated his helmet scanner, the HUD displaying a map of the area. There were multiple life signs inside the crater, and they were moving towards the center. Looks like we're not alone, Elias said, his hand hovering near his sidearm. Let's move. They made their way down into the crater, the glow growing brighter as they approached the center. As they reached the bottom, they found themselves standing in a large, open space. The ground was covered in strange, glowing symbols, and in the center of the space was a massive stone altar. Standing around the altar were several figures, each of them different in appearance but all radiating a sense of power and purpose. Elias recognized them immediately, they were the other chosen ones. One of the figures, a tall, humanoid being with shimmering silver skin, turned to face them. Their eyes glowed with a soft, blue light, and their voice echoed in Elias's mind. You have come, they said. We have been waiting for you. Elias stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. We're here to stop the Voidborn. We need your help. The silver-skinned being nodded. We know. The time has come for us to fulfill our destiny. Elias glanced at Kaeldar, who was standing silently beside him. What do we need to do? The being gestured to the altar. The Voidborn's prison is weakening. We must perform the ritual to strengthen the seals and prevent it from breaking free. But the Ziwanrak will try to stop us. As if on cue, the ground beneath them began to tremble, and a low rumble filled the air. Elias turned to see a group of figures emerging from the shadows, Ziwanrak warriors, their armor gleaming in the dim light. Kaeldar stepped forward, their golden eyes blazing with determination. I will hold them off. You must complete the ritual. Elias nodded, feeling a surge of adrenaline. All right. Let's do this. The other chosen ones moved to the altar, their hands glowing with energy as they began to chant in unison. The symbols on the ground flared to life, their light growing brighter with each passing moment. Elias stood at the edge of the circle, his sidearm drawn as he watched the Ziwanrak warriors approach. Kaeldar stood between them and the altar, their massive frame a barrier that the Ziwanrak would have to overcome. The first of the Ziwanrak warriors charged, their weapon raised high. Kaeldar met them head-on, their fists glowing with energy as they struck with incredible speed and precision. The warrior was sent flying, their armor shattered. But more Ziwanrak were coming, and Elias knew that Kaeldar couldn't hold them off forever. He raised his sidearm and fired, the plasma bolts striking true and taking down several of the warriors. The ground continued to tremble, and the air was filled with the sound of chanting and the clash of battle. Elias could feel the energy building around him, the power of the ritual growing stronger with each passing moment. As the final Ziwanrak warrior fell, Kaeldar turned to Elias, their golden eyes filled with determination. It is done. The seals are strengthened. The Voidborn will remain imprisoned. Elias felt a surge of relief, but it was short-lived. The ground beneath them began to crack, and a deep, rumbling voice filled the air. You think you can stop me? The voice boomed, echoing in their minds. I am eternal. I am inevitable. Elias turned to see a massive, shadowy figure emerging from the cracks in the ground. It was the Voidborn, its form shifting and changing, a being of pure darkness and destruction. Kaeldar stepped forward, their golden eyes blazing with light. We will not let you destroy this galaxy. The Voidborn laughed, a sound that sent shivers down Elias's spine. You are but insects, insignificant before my power. But Kaeldar did not falter. They raised their hands, and a brilliant light erupted from their body, engulfing the Voidborn in a blinding radiance. The other chosen ones joined in, their own powers adding to the light. Elias could feel the energy building, the power of the chosen ones combining to create a force that even the Voidborn could not withstand. The shadowy figure screamed, its form beginning to dissolve under the onslaught. With a final, deafening roar, the Voidborn was consumed by the light, its form collapsing into nothingness. The ground stopped trembling, and the air grew still. Elias fell to his knees, his body exhausted from the ordeal. He looked up to see Kaeldar standing before him, their golden eyes filled with a sense of peace. It is done, Kaeldar said. The Voidborn is imprisoned once more. Elias nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. We did it. We actually did it. Kaeldar reached out a hand, helping Elias to his feet. We could not have done it without you. You have proven yourself to be a true ally. Elias smiled, feeling a sense of pride. Thanks. But we couldn't have done it without you, either. The other chosen ones gathered around them, their expressions filled with gratitude and respect. The silver-skinned being stepped forward, their voice echoing in Elias's mind. You have done well, Elias Voss. The galaxy owes you a great debt. Elias shook his head. I just did what I had to do. But what happens now? The being smiled.